We are going to be interviewing a really exciting guest today. My name is Cameron Collins. If you don't know me, I am a revenue operations strategist with Rev Partners, community manager with Sprocketeer, and I've got my co-host, Mark Lerner, director of growth marketing for Deal Hub. And our guest on today is Wasif Kazim. Go ahead and give
Hey
everyone a little
everyone.
introduction.
Hey everybody. My name is Wasif. People call me Was for short because people say my name in many different crazy ways. So I said, you know what, just go Was. It's easier. I am the founder of Wasif Custom Consulting. I've done a lot of things over the years, probably 15 years deep in everything sales, marketing, retention, but recently have decided to knuckle down and focus on helping agencies and other B2Bs scale their sales, marketing, and retention operations and helping them go from 2 to 3 mil to 20, 30 mil as quickly as possible. I just happen to be a huge HubSpot fan of HubSpot along the way because probably launched HubSpot in 20 different environments in the last couple of years. It's been a lot of fun, and that comes with a lot of learnings that hopefully we get to share with you guys today.
And I'm really excited for this conversation because last time we spoke, Sprocketeer was on Discord, and I think we're both a little bit more new to the community in terms of it just engaging overall and figuring out what's this going to look like. But last time we spoke, I know we planned for I think 30 minutes, so we wound up talking for an hour to an hour and a half. If we manage to straight
That's it.
stick to the talking points that we have today, then it's going to be a packed hour as we talk about building a career in HubSpot. I know we have it on the calendar to talk about setting up HubSpot the right way to really maximize conversions. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff that we'll be digging into, but just go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about your thoughts when it comes to getting started in HubSpot. Like, you've obviously worked with a wide variety of companies. Where do you find that people are able to really get a foothold with starting that career and building themselves as an expert in the industry?
I think it's a couple of things. You can probably get a foothold anywhere, to be honest, but it really comes back down to how interested you are in learning about HubSpot, right? I worked in very small companies where they just had HubSpot installed and there was no one to take care of HubSpot. And I like tech and I got curious. And every day I was on the phone with HubSpot. I was emailing them and I was just finding out how to get things done in HubSpot. So you can learn a lot via all the knowledge base, the resources online. That's the beauty about HubSpot. I've used Salesforce, I've used Pipedrive, I've used all the CRMs out there. But with HubSpot, their support and the amount like they help you out to learn stuff is phenomenal. Like you can call them, you can speak to them directly. It's not like a 2 week waiting queue, right? Unlike some of the other businesses. Just be ready to be hungry and figure things out yourself. And a lot of it will come back down to trial and error because you'll try a bunch of things, you'll make mistakes, or it might work for 2 weeks and break. And you're like, okay, cool. Next time we're going to make it work for longer. Be ready to figure that out, no matter where you are. But in terms of a great place to learn as much as possible about HubSpot in a short amount of time, nothing beats working for an agency that specializes in HubSpot because you're exposed to literally 10, 20, 30 different accounts. And when you look at different accounts from different verticals, different countries, different industries, you just assimilate so many learnings in such a short amount of time. So if you were to work in one company for 5 years, you'll probably learn 10 times less than working in an agency for 6 months. Like it's crazy because it's just that fast. So personally, whether it's HubSpot or anything else, when it comes to marketing, sales, etc., I find that when you work in an agency for a year or two and you're starting off your career, it's ridiculously good for you because you learn so much and you literally get ahead of the pack with all those learnings.
I began my career in an agency as well, and it was boot camp for marketing. It was many moons ago. But when you when you took over HubSpot, had you had experience previously with CRMs, databases, or was it just, hey, this looks like something I can handle?
A little bit. Like I had a lot of experience with Salesforce as a salesperson, right?
Right.
I fell into a career of sales. I never wanted to do sales, always dreamed of being a marketer. A lot of things didn't go according to plan as I graduated out of university. And fast forward a few years later, the first job that I took was sales because it was the only job I could get, right? Very entry level sales job. So at that point, I used various CRMs. So there was Oracle for a while, Salesforce for a while, and many other things. And even recently, I dabbled with a lot of CRMs depending on the customers I'm working with. So to answer your question, I had a high level understanding of how to use a CRM to support my sales process. But because I was accustomed to the logic behind a CRM and I saw it more as a foe, more as a friend than a foe. A lot of people hate CRMs. Oh my God, do I have to update this thing? I really enjoyed it because I knew that it helps my success if I use it properly. So I had the general logic, but apart from that, no exposure to HubSpot and no exposure to anything marketing related within the CRM world.
Awesome.
I'm curious because I am a firm believer in learning from the school of life. Fortunately, for those of us who are interested in growing a career in HubSpot, we
Mm,
have the HubSpot Academy to teach us.
yep.
And even over the past couple of months, they've added so many courses. What are some of the foundational ones that you found have been really helpful for elevating your career that anyone should really dive into?
It's funny, like it was probably about 10 years ago. The way I got into marketing and started becoming good at marketing, also, although I had no experience with marketing, was HubSpot Academy, right? So when I started off with the inbound marketing course back then, I think it was. And then that was one of the main ones. And then I did that sort of entry level sales inbound one as well. And today you've got so many. You've got your foundational SEO, sales, so on and so forth, like that you can do. But in terms of that's more like subject matter knowledge, becoming good at understanding things about the marketing world and sales world and other pieces. But in terms of becoming good at HubSpot, they have all those HubSpot specific programs as well. I forget what they're exactly called, but it's like the HubSpot platform courses where they teach you how to use HubSpot sales, HubSpot marketing, HubSpot service, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of those entry level courses I think is definitely worth doing just to get your head around how HubSpot works. Because once you start understanding some of the foundations, to your point, it's all about the school of life. You just jump in, try it out, figure it out, learn, fail, and you become good at it after a while, right?
Yeah, I that's the way I've always learned. I've never been good at following we spoke one of our previous episodes, we talked a lot about kind of the course method and going through modules and all of that. But I think I have this like non-linear learning, and I basically do go every wrong path until I figure out the right path, right? It's
Yeah,
essentially process of elimination. And
that's
I
it.
can very much identify with the way you're describing it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
I'm curious because I know that you have worked with businesses of all different scales, and everybody wants to generate more revenue.
Mm,
Oftentimes, though, understanding how to generate revenue sustainably is the
mm,
conversation that's not being had, which people should be having.
yeah.
And I'm really curious to hear your take on really some of the fundamental reports, dashboards, and KPIs that you
Mm,
think most businesses should be leaning into.
yep. Yep. I'll probably mention something before I jump into the dashboards, right? One of the things that I find is extremely important for anyone to succeed with any CRM, not only HubSpot, is even before you start building dashboards, from a top-down perspective, the business needs to be very clear on where they want to get to 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 years from now, right? Without that overarching, hey, here's where we're going as a business, no matter what report you set up, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be used properly and it's not going to be successful long term, right? So once you understand, so from a sales perspective, like from a business perspective, let's say, hey, in the next 3 years, we want to go from 5 mil to 15 mil. Fantastic. Now you need to waterfall that down to what does that mean for every single team that you're going to check into HubSpot? Marketing team, cool. Marketing, if we need to go from 5 to 15, let's figure out exactly what your KPIs are. The KPIs I like to prescribe for marketing are threefold. One is leads generated, so NQLs per month. Two, pipeline created from marketing lead sources every month, a dollar value. Three, deals won, dollar value from marketing each month. That's the three main marketing KPIs. And the reason I bring up those KPIs is segues into the dashboards, and I'll touch on the sales piece in a bit as well. You need to configure your dashboard to show those things. Because if it's not in front of you every day, you're not going to hit your goals. And this is why the HubSpot becomes beautiful. So when we swap over to sales, again, configure your sales dashboards to mirror your sales team's top 3 KPIs, which my recommendation is number 1, obviously, revenue won per month. Number 2, pipeline generated per month in dollar value. And number 3, and there's actually number 4 as well. This kind of segues into something we'll talk about a little bit later, which is sales and marketing alignment. And the third one is MQLs not contacted. So if an MQL has come through, which ones have not been contacted yet? And the fourth one is you've a report on MQLs that have been contacted once, but haven't been followed up for more than 3 days. Put that front and center in front of your sales team, and you'll see amazing things happen. It seems really simple, really basic, but make sure they're looking at that data every day and actioning it every day. You will automatically see deals won increase by 20 to 30% per month. Actually, there are 2 more reports. There's deals not followed up greater than 7 days is another one. Actually, just 1 more report. Yeah. So if you have deals not followed up greater than 7 days, the MQL is not followed up greater than 3 days, MQL is not contacted, deals won and pipeline generated. If they're looking at those 5 things every single day, and your sales manager is looking at it every single day, and your sales manager's boss, the CEO, whoever is looking at it every single day, beautiful things happen.
Let's talk a little bit about source of truth for all of this then, because one thing that I hear all too often is that HubSpot reporting just doesn't do it for me. My business is so far ahead of what I need from HubSpot. What do you say to those people? And should HubSpot be the source of truth for everybody?
In my opinion, yes. So, often you'll see a lot of environments where the retention or customer success teams looking at one source of data, sales is looking at another spreadsheet, finance is looking at another spreadsheet. And even if you ask them a very simple question like how many customers do you lose per month, it takes them maybe 3 weeks to figure that out. It's hard because they have so much contradicting data. And by the time they get that information and bring it to you, it's out of date already. What's the point? And because of that, you can't make smart decisions. And when you can't make smart decisions, it impacts your ability to scale a lot faster. You might scale, but it'll take you 20 years instead of 3 years, right? So to answer your question, yes, HubSpot should be the source of truth, but it's not going to be the only source of truth. HubSpot is your kind of cockpit, bird's eye view of what's happening. And HubSpot will let you zone in on areas that look like they're going really well or look like they're not going well. And then you can dive deeper into that specific area as you need offline via Excel sheets, via your Looker Studio, via your finance system, whatever it is, right? But for me, for example, like a sales team, you don't need to be on anything except HubSpot, right? Everything you do, all your Excel sheets, all that sort of stuff, there's no reason you can't move that into HubSpot, right? There's only one reason where you can't move it into HubSpot. You think you need 100 data points to watch every single day, right? But the reality is you don't use those 100 data points. You're only paying attention to 3 or 4. But a lot of people think that all these 100 data points they're looking at every day. But if you really ask them, they're not using it. You only need 3 or 4 things to look at. And you put those most important things into HubSpot. The rest you can dive deeper if you need to down the track.
I know you mentioned it previously, MQLs, revenue to closed won, but give everyone one more recap of the most important data points that every business should be diving into.
Absolutely. I'll take this from a sales perspective first. So from a sales team's perspective, whether you're a sales manager or an individual sales rep, number 1 is deals won per month. So essentially deals won, revenue generated per month as the sales team or salesperson. Number 2, pipeline generated per month. This is new pipeline and new business created every single month in terms of pipeline. Number 3 is MQLs not contacted. These are leads that have come in to the business, but the salesperson or sales team have not reached out to. Number 4 is MQLs not contacted or not followed up for more than 3 days. So to clarify what the difference is with that one is an MQL's come through and you've reached out to them 3 days ago, but you have not had a follow-up for over 3 days. Why? Because if you don't follow them up for over 3 days, they go cold. You won't convert them. They're probably bought from someone else. So it's important that after that first touch point, if they haven't responded, you keep following up. So those are those ones, and two more. What was it? It was deals not followed up for greater than 7 days was the last one, actually. So you have a whole bunch of deals in your pipeline. Often it becomes really hard to keep up and remember which ones to follow up. So if you create a report that shows all the deals you haven't followed up in over 7 days, you've had an initial discussion with them, they're an open opportunity, they're a live opportunity, but you have not followed them up for more than 7 days. Make sure you're following up at least once a week. But don't be annoying. Don't say, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Add value every time you get in touch with them. You've had a really good discovery call at the beginning. You've learned a lot of things about the business. Give them stuff that's very relevant to them and pretend like a client and help them out in those follow-ups, right? Give them useful insights and feedback and pretend like they're a client. Eventually they'll become a client.
Where do you think something like, and I don't know if it's as relevant in your space, the metric of net revenue retention, kind of understanding the increase in revenue from your existing customers from one period to the next. It seems that in a time where people are trying to find more value in their existing customer base so that they can make up the revenue loss from increasing customer acquisition costs and challenges, that is becoming more and more of a critical piece.
Massive, man. And it's absolutely very relevant in my space. This is one of the things that I speak to a lot of my customers about. Whenever you're looking at generating revenue consistently, you have to always look at it from a couple of different buckets and look at them separately, right? A lot of companies, they just bucket new revenue into one big bucket. Hey, this is the amount of new revenue that we've made overall. Don't. Separate it into two main buckets. One is new business revenue, clients you've never worked with before, white logos, and brand new customers coming into the company. Two is what you mentioned, right? From existing customers, how many upsells and cross-sells are you making, right? And measure that separately. Why? When you have separate metrics for each, you're more likely to do both of them, right? If it's in one big bucket, it just gets lost. You don't know how much you're making in each bucket. Usually what I recommend is, and look, it varies per business, but generally I found this works quite well for most of the businesses that I work with. Have one person responsible for generating new business revenue. That's just brand new customers you've never worked for. And then on the customer service front or the customer success part, have one person there, a team lead, head of, whatever you want to call them, or a VP, responsible for retention, as you mentioned, and upsells and cross-sells. So not only are they in charge of maintaining a monthly retention rate, call it 95% monthly retention rate, but also for any revenue that they lose, that 5% that they lose, they're making up for it with upsells and cross-sells, and you set them a target for that. So you got to say, for instance, hey, your role as VP of retention, 95% retention rate is your number one KPI. Number two, you're doing upsells and cross-sells worth 20K recurring revenue every single month. That's their KPIs, right? And that way, and again, that's a beautiful part of HubSpot. I'm not sure we don't have the time to touch on today, but one of the most things that most people don't know about HubSpot is not only is it a fantastic sales and marketing tool, but if you use it properly, it's incredible for improving retention rates as well. Just incredible. But most people don't even go there. Like HubSpot service, NPS, CSATs, and structuring your HubSpot in such a way to better monitor churn and retention and upsells and cross-sells. So powerful, requires a lot of data hygiene and consolidation of data to get it right. But once you do it, your retention rates just go through the roof.
I get so incensed about retention because everyone focuses on new revenue, upsells, cross sells.
Absolutely.
And I've seen companies turn their entire bottom line around by saying, we're going to cut retention in half. And we're going to do it by creating initiatives to focus on that. And I would very much agree with you that most businesses really don't end up having conversations about retention. And so I certainly have some ideas, but I would love to hear your thought on incorporating retention in HubSpot, do you typically suggest having a dedicated pipeline for it? Do you rely on surveys? Where do you typically start in terms of just opening the conversation for a business to think about retention?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. And where I typically start is I try to understand what the business is doing today when it comes to retention, right? A lot of times customers leave you for just a handful of reasons, right? Number one, you're not telling them the work that you're doing and you're not being clear enough about what you're doing. Number two, they can see that you're doing a lot of work, but they can't feel the value of what you're doing, right? Those two things. Number three, which I hope isn't the case for anyone listening here, your work just sucks, so they leave you, right? But that's quite rare. Most companies out there do fantastic work, but they lose great customers just because they're not telling them about the work they're doing, or they're not telling them about the value and how that work connects to the value that the client wants. So I try to get a feel for where they sit on that front. Are they able to see these activities that your customer success managers are doing? How often are they doing it? Are you communicating with your clients frequently enough? And one of the core principles that I speak to my customers about, because you have to start with the core principles before you move into the HubSpot side of things, is number one, measure the right KPIs. It's sounds really strange, but a lot of the retention and customer success teams that I speak to, they don't have KPIs. It's just do your best. But what does that mean? So make it very specific KPIs, as I mentioned before, around retention, around upsells every month, and around maybe frequency of contact with customers, and maybe around CSAT, one of the words you mentioned before, like NPS. So we established that baseline of what is your KPIs. Once that's done, the next kind of core principle is to keep a customer at a high level. It's simple. It's communicate with them frequently. That's it. Right? It's very simple. A lot of companies don't do that. You'd be surprised. There'll be customers that I've worked with that have gone months without speaking to their client. Right? So the simple principle would be communicate at least once a week with your client. So when it's Friday, like we're on today, do a week recap, what you guys did for the week and what you're planning for the next week. Right? In the middle of the week on a Wednesday, give them a quick win. Hey, client, like we've been doing all this cool stuff. Here's a quick win, just thought I'd let you know. Very simple. You do those two things and keep up that frequency of communication, retention will go up. Like it's a no-brainer.
And I just
Or
want
it
to,
opens, yeah, go for it.
no, I was gonna say I like pulled up this research I'd done about to like the point of existing customers and the opportunity. The average, it's on average seven times cheaper to retain customers than attract new ones. And it's
Absolutely.
5 times cheaper to get expansion revenue than acquire the new ARR.
100%. And it's weird because as you mentioned before, Cameron, people are so just busy thinking about acquisition, new business, sales, marketing. You forget the massive opportunity that sits on the other end of the fence, which is actually in many ways a lot easier, a lot cheaper. But all you need to do is focus. And to focus, you need to use tools like HubSpot to help you focus, right? Because there's so much data out there. It's just impossible to get the data that you need to figure out who am I going to upsell and cross-sell, who's happy, who's not. And this is where HubSpot, when you set it up the right way, which I'll touch on in a little bit, helps you get that information. So as an account manager or a success manager, you rock up every day, you know exactly, these are the 5 accounts that are really happy. Fantastic. I'm going to put in a call to get them to leave me a Google review because I know that they're happy. Hit them up with an upsell or a cross-sell because I can see they're really happy with my services and I know this other thing could be useful for them, right? You get to really focus and you make that account manager's job easier. And when you make everyone's life easier, beautiful things happen, which is more revenue, upsells and cross-sells.
Here's a question. Who owns retention, sales or CS?
Ooh, for me, it's always a yes. I'm very much a believer of one job, one focus. If you're selling, sell. If you're in retention, retain. That's it, right? Often a fan, and look, there are many companies where you can mix both, but especially for the sort of companies that I work with, ranging between kind of 3 mil to 20 mil in terms of annual turnover. I think for that size, it's better to be specialist in what you do. So a salesperson, just get them super focused at hunting and closing business. Whereas in customer success, get them super focused on one thing is making the customer happy. That's it, right? And I find singular focus equals success, but there are many companies that tend to mix both those roles and still be successful. But this is what I generally find works.
It's interesting to hear that because it actually makes me feel like retention ought to be split into two camps, proactive and reactive. And I feel like the proactive retention should
Yep.
belong to CS, keeping clients
Yep.
happy, making sure that if there's a small escalation, it's handled.
Yep.
I've worked with companies where they would take their best reps, their best sales reps, put them on the retention team and have a reactive retention escalation and essentially say, please don't cancel here. Here's what we'll do. And
Yep.
that was how they were trying to save revenue that was like ready to walk out the door. I
Gotcha.
don't know. I would say every business needs that. And I know it's ticked off customers that wanted to cancel. And now they're talking to the sales rep that's fighting to hit their
Yeah.
number. But it just, I feel like from a strategic perspective, I think it's something that some companies, if they're seeing a high level of retention, maybe it's worth splitting it into two camps and you have your proactive CS minded, let's keep you
Yep.
happy, let's try not to cancel, and then you have your sales based reactive ones of you're not canceling, here's why, and they're the
Yep.
ones who will
Yep.
strong arm to save the deal, so to speak. Whether or not a company wants to roll that out is up to them though.
And it makes sense, man, because the salesperson initially sold in the deal, so getting them back involved when they're in those reactive circumstances helps, right? But one thing to add on top of what I mentioned before is, whilst I mentioned CS is responsible for retention and sales for new business, the truth is it only works really well when everyone cares about retention. So if a salesperson is selling in stuff that they know is going to churn, it's not going to work. So even when a salesperson is bringing on new business, they shouldn't be afraid to turn away customers that they know are not a good fit for the long term. And that should be baked into their KPIs. So one of the things I recommend is for salespeople, if anything churns within X months, whatever you think is a reasonable number of months, you got to claw back commissions because they've done the wrong job in terms of finding the wrong fit customer, right? So it becomes a group effort, but there's one primary responsible, which is the head of CS or head of sales, right? Responsible for new business and kind of retention. But also the other thing that people don't pay enough attention to, that's extremely important to retention, is the onboarding process. So the moment it goes from sales and is handed over to customer success, you got to make that frictionless, not for us internally, but for the customer. The customer should never have to repeat themselves, say, oh, but the salesperson told me this, but you're telling me this. You got to remove all that friction. And when you do, again, like that first 100 days is so important for customer retention. You make that an amazing experience for the clients, they'll stick around for years.
I'll do you one better, Cameron, regarding the question about who does retention, who's in charge of retention. I recently came across a company in which sales reported up to the chief customer officer. And I think that's a bit of an overcorrection by my estimation, but there are some companies that are just thinking about it, a total shift from the way it was not even a year ago.
Interesting.
Well,
and yeah, go for it, man.
I was going to say, I think this really gets into what kind of go-to-market motion do we have? What are our sales practices? Are we running a boiler room, Wolf of Wall Street style business that's grow at all costs, cold call, close the deal, do whatever you can to make money? Or is this, okay, we're following an inbound approach. We really care about like customer satisfaction and we really care about the people. And so I think that the type of company you are probably speaks to the type of approach and structure you want to take. But it's just regardless, I think that it's something that most businesses really aren't talking about, no matter where you fall on that spectrum.
Yeah, they're not enough, at least. And you're right, like the B2B kind of landscape has changed a lot. I think one of the statistics I read recently is 90% of the buyer's decision-making process actually happens before they talk to a salesperson, right? Which is wild. So salespeople only control about 10% of the buying process. So what I find works really well today in the B2B world is don't sell. right? Instead of selling, coach them, genuinely help them out, find out what they're struggling with, what the pain points are, why things are not working or why things are working well, and genuinely help them out. And don't be salesy. Obviously, don't be lazy either. Do your follow-ups, do all that sort of stuff, but in a non-salesy, value-added manner. And then when you do that, you'll set yourself apart from 90% of the people out there selling. And guess what? They'll come back to you because they trust you a lot more and buy from you eventually, right?
So I really want to get your take on how we build this into HubSpot. I will add one
Mm,
more opinion that I have where a lot of people have asked, okay, how do I get into revenue operations? How do I get into HubSpot? We talked a
yeah,
little bit about that at the beginning. I think if you really want to excel in revenue operations, so not just being a HubSpot admin, but helping companies to grow and scale, go spend a period of time as a sales rep. If you haven't done that,
absolutely.
it's going to add 6 months to a year to 2 years to your career track,
And
but
take
you're
that
going
amount
to
of time of your life.
yeah, and it'll take 4 times that off the back of your life, right? The reality is you'll learn so much more, and it's unfortunately in the sense that I talk to a lot of HubSpot admin that are great HubSpot admin, but they never sat in the sales seat, and they find it difficult to have conversations with sales leaders around here's what we should do because they hadn't done it themselves. There's a lot of things that work in theory, but then in practice, that's a very different story. That would be an opinion that I would have. Was, I'd love to know your take on building just a really tight and aligned sales and marketing instance into HubSpot, whether that's custom properties, training, etc. Walk me through your thought process on that.
Absolutely, man. Like one thing to mention is if you guys are going to successfully scale any business, one thing you have to make sure is that you put a lot of effort into making sure sales and marketing are aligned. Yeah. You see a lot of businesses where sales will be pointing their fingers at marketing, saying the leads are not good enough or not high enough. You got other businesses where marketing's pointing at sales, going sales not doing a good enough job following up leads, so on and so forth. So you need to get rid of that and make sure that whoever is in charge of the sales department and the marketing department are 100% on the same page. And HubSpot becomes a huge component in making sure that happens. Number one, for both of those roles, establish clear KPIs. And this will segue into your question about how to set up HubSpot. Because again, you always need to start with the foundational business requirements before you go into HubSpot and building reports. Otherwise, you'll be changing your reports and tweaking it forever because you're not sure what the business unit is trying to get in terms of what they want from the report. Start with the KPIs. Number one, for your HubSpot team, for your sales team and your marketing team, what are their KPIs? Ultimately, both of them are there to make new business revenue for your business. Ultimately, usually that's the purpose, right? So let's say that hypothetically, the sales team needs to hit 100K per month is their goal. The question is, cool, out of that 100K, what percentage does the business expect to come from marketing versus sales sourced efforts? Let's say the business says 50-50. Great. So out of 100K, that marketing's goal is to make 50K new business per month. And sales' goal is to make another 50K new business per month from sales sourced efforts, cold calling, networking, whatever it is. So those figures, the reason those numbers are important is that's going to be your goal. That 50K is going to be the goal for marketing on their charts. And that 50K is going to be the goal trend line for sales on their charts. And on both marketing and sales dashboards, you have exactly the same reports, pretty much, right? Marketing will have a few more going into detail about other marketing things, but from a revenue top line perspective, you want the same reports in both dashboards so you're both looking at the same thing. So if sales is made 70K for the month, and they can see that 60K from that came from marketing, you think they're going to complain about marketing? No. This is where it's important. Or they know, okay, cool. 60Ks come from marketing. I need to hit another 40K from sales because we're under indexing on what's expected from us as a sales unit because we need to hit a lot more. So there's that tight alignment and marketing can help with that as well. So that's a foundational thing that I think is very important to get out of the way before you actually start setting up these reports. And that needs a rubber stamp from people top down in the business, CEO, founder, chief revenue officer, whoever it is, right? And then we get into the dashboards, right? With the dashboards, there are a few things that are, in my opinion, really important to set up in terms of properties. HubSpot has the custom original source property, which is great, which tends to give you an idea of where any lead came from. It might say organic search, paid search, offline, and all that sort of stuff. But the problem with that is it's not specific enough. So for example, organic source might show paid social. And you're going, wait, like I do LinkedIn, I do TikTok, I do all this stuff. Which one did it come from? So what I'd recommend, the combat that I personally like is I set up a custom property called lead source. And in that lead source property, I have a list of all the different channels that I'm investing in from a marketing perspective, but also your typical sales sourced lead channels as well. Might be networking at an event, cold calling, refer partnerships, etc. So for any lead that comes into the system, number one thing, mandatory to tag the lead source, right? Because if you don't tag the lead source, down the track, when a deal is won, you have no idea where it came from, and you don't know which channel's working and which one's not, right? So data hygiene is so important to be able to use HubSpot effectively and to be able to scale your business effectively. And if you don't have all these data points, you won't know where to invest more, where to invest less in. So lead source is one, lead status is another one that I recommend, which is just a bit of a reminder for the sales and the marketing team. It might sound like, hey, new not contacted, it might sound like unqualified or disqualified lead, so on and so forth, or tried, couldn't reach him, follow up later, whatever. It's just a little bit of a flag under each lead on the next thing that you need to do is lead status. And then lifecycle stage is another property, which is already baked into HubSpot, which is great. But on that front, you want to consistently tag that accurately. So for example, if it's a marketing qualified lead, you want to make sure that it's tagged as marketing qualified lead, and you want to progress it to sales qualified lead, opportunity, one, etc. as you progress. But that's very important to tag those things, because then you can, in the future, pull reports by lead source and say, hey, we've won $20,000 this month. 5K came from Meta, 5K came from LinkedIn, and 10K came from sales source efforts. Fantastic. And you're to double down on. But yeah, those are the main things that I'd say you'd customize. And also from a sales best practice perspective, in terms of how to use HubSpot, many people use HubSpot different ways, but this is in summary how I'd suggest that you use HubSpot. Always start at the contact level. So a lead comes through, tag the lead source, tag all the right data and emails, and from the contact, add a deal to the contact. And then you go jump into deals and progress the deals through the various stages. The reason I recommend you do that is the way I see it, the contact is a bit of a fingerprint for a lead, right? And unless you have that data attached, so unless you attach a deal to the contact, yep, you won't be able to see where this deal came from, because all the data resides on the contact level. So in future, when you want to pull reports on ROI, which channels are the best, which channels are not working, if you're not creating it this way, it becomes a lot harder to do in terms of figuring out what's working for you guys.
I'll tell you something that frustrates me is when people get upset about some of the things that HubSpot doesn't do out of the box. Like for me, for example, I use lead status when I come in and start working with a company and helping them build their RevOps out and clean up their instance. And we'll use lead status as an indicator of who owns the contact. Now, not just which rep owns it, but which department. So if it's in contacted, building interest, right, demo completed, sales owns it. But if there's a reason where it goes into nurturing or some other unqualified, now it goes back to marketing, for example.
Yeah,
And
gotcha.
so this isn't something that necessarily happens natively. You've got to build some workflows, probably out of custom property. But it's really interesting because some of the largest companies use HubSpot. And so I find it funny when you get a smaller business that says we're too complex and I don't think we could. Sometimes less is more. And I think that sometimes those really fundamental practices get skipped. Is there anything that you tend to see that's most commonly just not being done or universally should be done, whether that's creating views or using lists more appropriately than what's typically being done out the box.
No, absolutely. And look, HubSpot doesn't come out of a box, and there's a lot of things it can do, but that's almost intentional because every business is slightly unique in its own way. And if you just put it all had it all set up out of the box, then it just wouldn't serve your business the right way, right? So it's cool that it has that customizability to make it useful for your business. But coming back to your question on some of the things I think people should be doing more of, sometimes it's the most basic things, right? So you have your deal pipeline, right? Sometimes your deal pipelines, I've seen some deal pipelines that have 15, 20 stages from the time that start speaking to them to the time that it's closed. Don't do that. Keep it as simple as possible, right? Because if you have 15 to 20 stages, you're not going to update and maintain all of them, right? So to your point before, less is more. Once you nail crawling first, then get more complicated and do other things if you want in the future, but they go straight to like full throttle straight away, and they often fall flat on their face because of that. So keep your deal stages minimal, 4, 5, 6 stages max, right? And also on the deal stages, create mandatory properties as you push deals through the pipeline. Yeah. So what I mean by that is if you've had a first discovery call with a customer, at that stage, you might not know how much the package is you're going to give them. That's okay. So don't ask for that as a mandatory property. Or if you've done a pitch and you've moved it to pitch presented or whatever the deal stage is, make sure at that stage you're collecting deal amount as a mandatory property. Make sure you're capturing services recommended as a mandatory property, because all these things help you forecast close dates. At that point, make sure you're asking for a close date as a mandatory property, because this will help you with your forecasting, not only from a sales perspective, but also from a customer success perspective, because they need to know what's coming so they can be ready, right? So those mandatory properties in the pipeline stages is probably the most common mistake that I see people making. And because they don't do that, they have really dirty data, because people are just putting in whatever they want at whatever stage, and data is extremely inconsistent. In terms of going back to the theme of where we started, maximizing conversion rates, this simple thing of data consistency and mandating properties across each stage of the deal pipeline will help so much in terms of pushing deals faster across the line.
And I think that to your point of something you said earlier, which is keeping things simple, right? Not having 15, 20 deal stages. And I've had conversations with businesses that said that's just how many steps there are in like how we engage with our customer. That might be the amount of steps that you take on the sales side. Maybe
Correct.
they
Yeah.
even take 20 different actions, but it doesn't mean that every action needs a stage in and of itself. Is there a world where that could make sense for a business? But I definitely think that keeping things more simple is really key here. And
Yeah.
one thing that I'm a big proponent of in terms of helping businesses to get their data cleaned up when it comes to really mastering HubSpot as a sales professional and a sales leader is stacking required properties. So now, fortunately, you can just turn on a rule so stages can't be skipped. But
Yep.
regardless of whether or not that rule is on, if you ask for a potential amount in the first stage, but you
Yep.
never ask for it again, HubSpot's never going to prompt the person to check it again. And so, yeah, you initially got that data, but it was never updated by the time it gets to closed one. So I'm a huge fan of if you ask for it in stage one, ask for it in every following stage. If you ask
Agreed.
for it in stage three, ask for it in every following stage. Little things like that that aren't
Yep.
necessarily intuitive, but make a huge difference.
It does, man. It's that's a funny thing. Like in HubSpot, you'll be doing a lot of tiny things, but over time, it's gonna save salespeople a lot of time. And also it improves the data accuracy, conversion rates, and many things across time as well. One other thing that I meant to mention that I see that very simple thing to do, but many people don't do, is we've created these beautiful dashboards. And these dashboards have amazing data in them that's going to help you close business faster, but they never look at it. What's the point? You put all this hard work in, you've done all this amazing stuff, you've got this amazing asset that you can use, but you don't use it. So one of the things that I do is recommend is get that report emailed to you automatically at a cadence that you like. It might be weekly, it might be daily for some reports, but whatever time you choose, let's say you choose, hey, make this report land in my inbox at 8 a.m., block that time out. 8 to 9 a.m., you're looking at the HubSpot dashboard. That's the one thing that you do. You're going through it to scan for information, look at trends, look at action points. After 9 a.m., you go ahead and action those things and make it come to life. So do that consistently, number one. Number two, make it a habit for your team to do it consistently as well, because HubSpot's only going to work and people are only going to use HubSpot if it's happening from the top down. So your CEO needs to be looking at HubSpot every single day. He or she needs to be following this process. And then everyone that reports into them needs to be following the process. And everyone that reports into them needs to be following the process. And every week you have at least one meeting, whether it's a weekly team meeting or a weekly one-on-one, where the first thing you bring up as soon as you go into that meeting is the HubSpot dashboard. Because that's your source of truth. And that's where all conversations start. And then you segue into other things.
What do you think about signing other people up in the company organization to get those dashboard emails, whether it's the sales dashboard so that everybody sees the leaderboard, or is that, I don't know. I've done it before so that the person I report to can't say they can't be like, where is this? I need to see this.
Yep.
But I don't know. I don't know what the etiquette is there.
Usually I like doing it at a team level. So for example, if it's a sales team, I would send the sales team a team view of how the team's going. And that shows how individuals are comparing as well. Hey, this person's in the lead, so on and so forth. It creates a little bit of healthy competition, which is okay. But what I refrain for doing is sharing, say, sales team information with the customer success team. Not because it can't be shared and that I don't want to share it. It's more so I don't want to create noise for the customer success team because I want them to be focused on retention stuff. So I'll send them a separate retention dashboard that's more relevant to them retaining more clients and doing upsells and cross-sells. So I try to keep it segmented, but in a kind of weekly stand-up across the business or a monthly stand-up across the business, this information would be shared to the whole public, right? So everyone can be across what's happening.
My rule of thumb is if you asked for it, you better look at it. Now,
Yep.
how do we enforce that though? Because that sounds nice in theory, but at the end of the day, it happens to everybody where I want a report. You build the report, you build the dashboard, and 3 weeks later, somebody says, hey, what does this report mean? How do I interpret it? And when that happens, now I know I failed. I missed a step. I would add on to Mark's point that unless somebody has an objection to receiving a report they requested, then yes, they certainly should be notified. On the flip side, though, I am a firm believer that the important notifications that feed into reports should also go out as emails. So, for example, a deal is moved to closed one. It is so
Yes.
rare that I see the type of workflow that I would be inclined to set up, but one that would say deal is closed one, email sales manager, right? So you have a property on the contact or the deal and it says sales manager is, and then
Yep.
that person and their leadership team, then they get an email that says deal was moved to close one, check it out. Right.
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up. Like that's another couple of things I always recommend for any deals. One, send an alert to key people. So sales manager, founder, CEO, whoever it is that need to know about it, just at a high level so they can keep their finger on the pulse. And also I would do the same for brand new marketing leads coming through the door as well, because most businesses spend a lot of money on marketing. Just for them to have that rhythm that, hey, things are going well, it's really good to keep them CC'd in on it too.
And we've talked a little bit about marketing. One thing that I find interesting in terms of working with companies that oftentimes will work with marketing agencies. Oftentimes, I find that marketing agencies are good at marketing, which is what they're selling, right? That's the obvious. What they oftentimes suck at is building reports in HubSpot for key leadership team and explaining this is why what we're doing is effective. They can say we created a lead. What they can't oftentimes say is, here's how much you spent in revenue. Here's the amount of leads that we created. And here's how much of those turned into X amount of dollars. Is that
Exactly.
something that you ever see and have to correct?
All the time, man. Like one of the things, whether it's and we'll talk about marketing, like in the marketing world, many marketers are good at pulling reports for themselves, but the one thing that they're not good at doing is managing upwards in terms of the impact of the things that they're doing. How is it adding to the company's bottom line? And this is where, again, HubSpot is very useful because when you have when you set up those reports in the marketing dashboard and you set up charts every single month, it correlates to revenue won from marketing. Guess what? The CEO can see the bottom line impact. He can see that, hey, I know that I've spent 30K this month in marketing. This shows me that I've made 90K this month in marketing. I'm not going to cut marketing spend, right? So it's really important to like not only show deals won, but also pipeline created. But you're right, a lot of people struggle with that and they don't do that enough. And this is why after a while, people lose faith in marketing because they can't see the revenue impact of what it's doing. Yeah. But if you put that front and center, not only in front of the founder, CEO, in front of the sales team every day, soon enough, sales team will be championing marketing. And that creates a nice little team there. And then whenever anyone complains about marketing, sales will have marketing's back, being like, what are you talking about? They're doing a great job. And it just flows upwards as well. So yeah, that data and that dashboard, that's why it's really important.
One of the things that I know you're a fan of is getting sales to look at the things that matter to them. Dashboards, KPIs, some type of schedule for the day. What's a
Yeah.
way that you typically approach having that conversation with leadership and structuring some of the things that their reps should be looking at every single day or structuring their day every single day?
That's a good question, man. The first thing that I say is the sales leader needs to practice what they preach, right? A lot of times you'll have sales leaders that tell their team to do things, but they never do those things. So I say, hey, sales leader, first thing we need to do is to make sure that you are looking at HubSpot every day for at least 1 hour in the morning or the afternoon. You pick whatever works for you, right? You've blocked it, you've time blocked it, and you do it every single day. And off the back of that, you're following your sales team up, right? That way they know that you're looking at it daily, you're paying attention to the data, and guess what? They will start doing it as well. So first is start with the sales leader, and before that, start with the founder or the CEO or whoever the sales leader's boss is. So that segues down. And then for the sales team, I recommend that the sales leader, again, ask the same of their sales team. Hey, every day, I expect you to update HubSpot, put in a 30-minute slot first thing in the morning or an hour, whatever you want. Update it every single day, not once a week, once a month, every single day, because there's so much to update, right? And you look at this dashboard that you have that we've spoken about and make sure that all these things are up to date. For example, make sure that MQLs not contacted is always 0. I don't ever want to see an MQL that you have not contacted, right? Or make sure that deals not followed up more than 7 days is not looking out of control. If you've got 3, 4, 5 deals there, oh, good. If you've got a 50 there, I'm going to be really mad, right? Keep that low. So you set mini KPIs for each one of those key charts and tell them that to update it every day. And every week, as a manager, you should be having a one-on-one with your sales team. When they come into that one-on-one, the expectation is you're coming into the one-on-one with all this data updated, even before you come in, right? And then that's the first thing we're going to look at. First 15 minutes, we're going to talk about your HubSpot dashboard as a whole. And then we segue into other BAU things to chat about. But that's the cadence that I would recommend. Do it every day, every week in your one-on-ones. Really cool things happen on the sales front when you do that.
I find that when we practice what we preach, the business gets a lot more out of everybody. And I think it's a double-sided coin in the sense that you definitely don't want to ask for too much information, but you want to make sure that when you're asking sales reps to fill information out, they're filling it out And so, with the time that we have left, I just want to open the floor for you to give any golden nuggets or advice to sales leaders or even sales reps that just want to make the most out of HubSpot and really use it to elevate their careers and crush their numbers.
I think the one point I just mentioned and I touched on a little bit before is don't think about HubSpot or your CRM as an admin task. It's not. If you actually use HubSpot the right way, whether you're a sales leader or a salesperson, it's going to help you close a lot more business. You close a lot more business, you're going to make a lot more money. Those commissions start rolling in and things are good, right? So stop looking at it as your enemy or as a nice to do. Just start using it and figure out the most effective ways to use it to empower you to do your job better. And just remember it's there to help you. It's not this annoying thing that you have to do. And once you embrace that, you're going to be incredibly successful.
I think it's interesting in the sense that HubSpot is like a box and it's the same out the box for every single business.
Yeah,
And you can have two businesses that do the same exact thing. They have the same goals, but one succeeds and the other doesn't. And it's because of
exactly.
how you end up building that infrastructure and the processes. And that's why it's so important that I made a post recently about how you don't just want to be a HubSpot admin, you want to really be a revenue operations professional who's great at developing things in HubSpot. The difference there being that it's one thing to be able to build stuff, it's another to be able to do it strategically. And I think
Correct.
that's really important. And it's something that really does need more emphasis.
Agreed, man. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Was, thank you so much for coming on the SprocketPod
Thank you,
episode.
man.
I know that this conversation has been a long time coming, and I'm really glad we got to have you on. For anyone that's
Thanks for
watching,
having me.
It must be
absolutely.
like it must be tomorrow there already, right? You're in the future.
Friday morning. Yeah, 9 a.m. here.
Crazy.
4 o'clock in the evening Central Time, the next day in Australia. That really is true time travel.
It is.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who
Thank
are
you so much
watching,
for having me, guys. Yeah.
absolutely. For those who are watching outside of LinkedIn, do follow Mark Lerner, Cameron Collins, and Wasif Kasim on LinkedIn. Links in the show notes. You can also join us in the Sprocketeer group. Links in the show notes for the largest independent group of HubSpot admin. You can also check out previous episodes on YouTube and Spotify. And if you're wanting to really elevate your HubSpot game, check out the HubSpot admin HubSpot user group by Deanna Gloff and Kyle Jepson. Thank you for joining us and Sprocket on.
Bye, everybody.
See you guys. Thank you.